Welcome to Post Break. My name is Chris Peterson. I'm the head of innovation at the PNYA and executive producer at Dungeon Beach Post. I will be moderating, and today's topic is New York State film and TV tax credit updates. Now for some opening remarks, I'd like to introduce, he's a senior advisor at Goldcrest Post, Prod Pro, and showrunner, and he's the PNYA's newly elected vice chair. Please welcome Pete Conlin.
Thanks for joining and welcome everybody. I wanted to give just a quick overview of the state of the industry, our feature film and episodic production industry here in New York. I think we all know that the restart didn't happen as quickly as we wanted. These last 18 months have been really difficult for business owners, professionals, and everybody working in and around the region. And like we've done so many times in the past, starting in 2004, when things aren't going exactly as we want, we turn to our elected officials, we turn to the governor's office, Governor Hochul's office, and the Empire State Development Group, and we say, what can we do to try to make things better, to try to jumpstart things? Because, as the restart's happening, not only is it a little slower than we wanted, but we're under a lot of pressure from productions going international, neighboring states' tax credits, and we needed help. And so they provided it. And I know the rest of the panel is going to explain some of the exact details, but I just wanted to sort of tell you what we see right now is some of the trends happening, since we've recently passed these new tax incentive plans, and just also in general what we see. So, at Prod Pro, we track every scripted project globally over $1 million. So we typically have a pretty good feel about what's happening, what's going on, what's happening, and what's coming up. And, in the last, I would say, 6 weeks, we've seen a significant uptick in projects, moving in the right direction. And the way we think about it is, when we see projects go from from development, that's basically like every studio just puts out their slate. So we all see the projects that are in development. When we see them moving from development to active development, pre-production, into production, those are the trends that we're looking for. And so, currently in our region right now, which is better than any other region in the US right now, we've got 42 episodic projects that are moving into those phases and 95 feature films that have transitioned from some form of development into active development or pre-production or production in the last 90 days. And so that's a trend that we feel that's as good a trend as we've seen since the restart, since we were dealing with the strike. We're not at the 2022 all-time highs, and I don't know if the industry will ever get back to that, to those heights. But as we sit here on the precipice of the summer, June starting, I can say that the trend is in the right direction. That's a 25% increase in the starts at things that we saw, as late as February 1st. So I don't know that we've all felt the effects yet. It's not like every company, it's not like every, industry professional is working right now. We still have a lot of people out of work. We have a lot of businesses that are still struggling. But, I can say from sitting around the lunch table at Goldcrest just the past couple of days, bids are going out of all these companies, crews are getting calls about their next jobs. And I think, this is the first time in a while that we think at least we'll have a fall that resembles something closer to normalcy. So that's really, the update. And I think a lot of these incentives are going to help. So that is the business update. With that said, I'd like to introduce the Post New York Alliance's new chair and CEO of Phosphene, Vivian Connolly.
Hi, everybody. I'm so excited to be here and to sort of see all of you. I'm delighted to be the new chair of the PNYA. I have enormous shoes to fill. Yana's been doing this job since, I think, the early 18th century. And all of the achievements that we've had so far are thanks to her. So I just wanted to give her a quick shout out. Pete and I are going to be reaching out more in the coming weeks to talk to you individually, hopefully, to hear from you, from the companies and from individual members to sort of hear where you are, what you need, what's working, what's not working. It's been a lot to jump into this, so I'm sorry I'm a little late in that, but you will be hearing from us this summer. And the only place that I think Yana and I differ is I think we should sing our praises more and the praises of the accomplishments of this New York government that's been unbelievably supportive of us. So I'm probably going to be a little bit more show-offy about all the things that have happened than Yana was. I just wanted to say a couple quick things, and I want this really to get into the meat of what there is to talk about today. And we're thrilled that we have members from ESD with us today, which we're really lucky to have. I just wanted to say that this board is 100% volunteers. Not only are we volunteers, but we pay to be in the board. We're only here to bring work to New York and to create jobs. That's our whole mission, and to create education events and to create inclusion events and equity events. And that's why we're here. And I think that, we've done some really great work, and I'm very happy to say that Yana has graciously agreed to stay on as our head of government affairs because she's the master of it. And we work as a team for sure, and we all go to Albany together. But her institutional knowledge on this is just can't be beat. And so we're really lucky to have her staying on. And then I quickly wanted to thank Governor Hochul and ESD, which for those of you who don't know what that stands for, it's Empire State Development. And they have gotten and supported the importance of post-production really from the beginning. And I think that's something that other territories don't get, that post-production is the land of steady, stable, good paying jobs when we have the work, and they've understood it from the jump. And so I just wanted to thank them. And I wanted to also thank, for those of you who don't know, we have a lobbyist and a lobbying team. Larry Shearer is our lobbyist, and his company is called State and Broadway, and they've been unbelievably supportive and helpful. Yana's going to talk about the tax credit changes, which are great, and I think reason to be really optimistic. We definitely need your support. All this work takes time and money, and we need your support. So we hope if you aren't a member already that you'll consider joining. And I also just wanted to say that part of why it's so important is I was very involved in the visual effects part of this change because that's what I do. But the reason we knew what the problems were that needed to be addressed is because I heard from members of the community. So it wasn't just my experience. I was hearing from independent supervisors and independent producers and executives and members why jobs weren't landing here. And we were able, in cooperation with ESD, to make changes to address those. And so we do really want to hear from you when things aren't working and when things are working. So after this is over and after you learn about all of this, if things are going better, if things are really working, or if you notice there's a glitch in something, we want to hear from you so that we can continue to address all of your needs. And I'm going to throw to Yana, who will take it from here.
Thank you, Vivian. Yana Collins Lehman, outgoing chair of the Post New York Alliance, current head of government affairs. Very excited to have Vivian and Pete taking over. Their fresh chair energy is going to be exactly what this organization needs. And I just want to give a little historical context to emphasize the momentousness of the tax credit changes that ESD will cover. You guys know I'm always here to answer any questions that may come up after this, if they come to you. But so that you understand the historical context of the Post Alliance, in 2009, we were 14 companies and Local 700, and we set out to establish the post-only credit, and we knocked it out of the park. We went up to Albany and we got it. So we thought lobbying was really easy, and we thought we were incredible. But the credit was only 10% and the allocation was $7 million. So we quickly realized it was not going to attract the amount of businesses that we had assured legislators that it would. So we set out to go expand the credit. And that is when we realized that politics is rough. And we got nowhere in 2011. We got nowhere in 2012. And then Rhoda Glickman moved to town. And after 2 years of failing to convince legislators that a more aggressive credit would create jobs, it would bring businesses, it would expand all of our facilities, Rhoda got it in our first meeting, which I will never forget. And she knew that the current governor, who was Andrew Cuomo at the time, would also get it. So that very year, we were able to expand the credit. The governor put it in his budget. That is when the credit was increased to 30%. And we created the VisFX animation credit. It has been my great honor and a source of tremendous excitement for me to work with Rhoda and ESD for the past 10 years. These improvements that have been made are exactly what we need to stimulate our business, but Governor Hochul took it to a level that I don't think any of us anticipated or even suggested. So it's incredibly exciting, and I will let Rhoda tell you more about that. But thank you, Rhoda and Yoni and Connie, Rhoda, Yoni and Connie, all for being here and for being invaluable to the organization, our very close partners. And I now introduce to you Rhoda Glickman.
Thank you, Yana. Wow, this is really a love fest. And Yana, I certainly can't take the credit for passing that legislation, but I remember, and the state has since then, I can tell you that both Governor Cuomo and Governor Hochul understand the importance of post-production and really care about this part of the industry. They care about the whole industry. But I know that the governor's staff, I think it was a few weeks ago, said that they actually want to track the impact of the changes of the incentive to what is going on, what happens to post. So we're going to be coming back. I mean, just hearing, Pete, from you, these new numbers, it's the first time we've heard what's been going on since the incentive was passed. And I'm like overwhelmed. I'm sure Connie and Yoni feel the same way, because I mean, it's really amazing. And it was the same thing that happened in 2013. I think we were pounding on Yana, and I think you had something like, what, 3 or 4 post-production projects in New York. And then when we went 10 to 30, it jumped, I remember, from 17 to 30. And then all of a sudden we were at 100. And we lost count of the new companies that came in. But just know that the governor's staff, ESD, understands the importance of your industry and to the entire film and TV industry. And we are just thrilled that what has gone on is impacting and making a difference. We will always rely on you for for input. We don't know the industry like you do. And we have had an incredible guide with Yana. I mean, you have done the roadmap for us, and your suggestions, your input have made it possible for us to do what's right to ensure that post-production stays strong and vibrant in the state. So I want to thank you. You know, I'm looking at so many of you who have been part of this, and I've known you, you know, for, I mean, more years than what I want to say. And you know, you're the eager ones. You're the ones that are really the stability to New York. And I just want to thank you all. Obviously, we all want to thank the governor for championing these proposals. She looked at this and knew that this industry depended on all the sectors of the industry to be important. So when we go through the different proposals that are now were passed and part of the incentive, there's something for each sector, whether it's the major studios, the independents, or the post-production, because in order to be strong, all of the sectors had to be strong. So there's a lot of thought that went into these proposals. Obviously, we also want to thank the legislature for passing it. these proposals, and then once again, the governor for signing and making them all go into law. Once again, a huge thank you to all of you for attending the Zoom session and for all your work over the past years. This is a key industry, which makes an economic impact on the state, and it creates tens of thousands of jobs. We all know that. And before jumping into the specifics of the incentive, and I just briefly want to go through them all, and then I'm going to turn it over to Yana, Yoni, and Connie to answer your questions. I want to just briefly go through these enhancements and the changes that were made to both incentives, both the production and the post-production incentive. We feel will ensure that New York stays competitive with other jurisdictions. So without further ado, first one is extending the program funding through 2036. That's 2 years, 2036. We also shorten the time frame for applicants to actualize the credit. Remove the individual cap on above the line eligibility while maintaining the guardrail not to exceed 40% of all other costs. Create a first in the nation Production Plus program, which will incentivize recurring investments in New York State by bringing multiple productions and receiving an additional uplift on projects after these companies reach the threshold. By the way, this Production Plus will sunset in 2028, but any episodic TV series that is part of Production Plus will retain their uplift even after it sunsets. For proposals specifically for independent production, we have implemented the new Empire State Independent Film Production Program. If any of you have an idea of a different title for that, we are open to that because that's quite a mouthful to say. But this is an additional $100 million initiative to expedite the monetization of the incentive. And for the piece that you're most excited to hear about, we've added for post-production flexibility to the incentive by enabling productions to either reach a threshold of 75% of the total qualified post-production costs or spend $1 million in qualified costs. Further, the spend thresholds for both VFX and animation will be reduced from 20% to 10%. The spend thresholds will be lowered to $500,000. Our work is not done yet. Over the next coming months, we will be working on regs and guidelines to complement these enhancements, and we will be looking for your input and suggestions. Once again, thank you all for being here today. Thank you for all the work that you do, all the jobs you create. We're really proud of the work, as I said, and I can assure you, you have our support. Today, we're going to be answering some questions. If we don't get to you today, please know you can reach out to Yoni, Connie, and me in the coming days and weeks. And without further ado, I'm going to turn it back to Yana, Yoni, Connie, to answer your questions. Let's begin.
Thank you, Rhoda. I don't see any questions yet. Could our explanations have been so thorough that no one has any questions? That would be incredible. One question that I've gotten that I can answer in case any of you are just too shy to ask is very exciting news about the scoring.
I forgot.
Oh, okay. We didn't talk about that. Yeah. So there's a new scoring incentive that is for the production credit. So if you qualify for the production credit and you complete your score in New York with 5 or more musicians, there is an additional 10% credit on the costs of scoring. So that's basically a 40% credit on your scoring costs. Pretty cool. I know one question is, does that include the composer? Connie, Yoni.
You know, we're in the process of defining what constitutes scoring costs, but so I don't want to say definitively right now. We're leaning in the yes direction, but I can't say that definitively this afternoon.
And just to build upon what Connie said, you know, if you're upstate, obviously that could go up to 50% on your scoring costs for the film production program or for the independent program. And while there isn't an additional incentive, the scoring costs are still be eligible in the post-only program.
Just want to clarify. So if we're not qualified for production, but post only, we do get the uplift on the score. Is that what you just said?
No,
No.
So to get the 10% uplift for score, you must shoot then and qualify for production.
Yes.
right.
That's disappointing. Okay. All right.
One other question that I saw come into the chat was about timing and eligibility, and if this affects projects that are currently in post. All of the proposed changes, not proposed, all the past changes impact new applications after January 1st, 2025. So if the project submitted its initial application after January 1st, 2025, it would be eligible for the changes in the production program, the changes in the post program, and potentially to apply to the new independent program, which we're still finalizing.
I can answer the question about what we're doing to compete with the UK, because we specifically designed the change to the VisFX credit based on the threshold in the UK. So our VisFX animation credit, the threshold to get into the program used to be that you had to do 20% or $3 million, whichever was less. That's when we thought maybe Michael Bay would come and do some shots of Transformers here. And we learned over the course of 10 years that it's not helpful. And the UK's is 10%. So now it's a 10% threshold. So 10% of your visual effects animation spend or $500,000, whichever is less. So very easy to get into the visual effects animation credit.
Can I jump in on that one just very quickly? So what the feedback that I was getting was that, like to Yana's point, when the VFX portion was implemented, the concept was like, maybe we'll get 20% of Spider-Man or 20% of Marvel, whatever. But it turns out that New York really appeals to the sort of more mid-sized shows and the mid-sized movies, some of which don't have $3 million to spend, and many of which like to spread their work out over many territories just based on preferences of who they want to work with. And so basically what the change does for VFX is if you have a smaller show, or if you have already predetermined that you're going to split your show up over a number of territories, you can still slot in work in New York. So it just opens the door to way more. There were lots of shows. I was getting call after call about shows that were like, well, I have $1 million that I would spend with you, but I can't spend it because the threshold is $3 million. So in that world of $500,000 to $3 million, there's a lot of work that we were losing that we're hoping we'll recapture now.
And I think, you know, from the post-production side, we got concerns from projects that were really concerned about the 75% threshold and that they were up to 73%, 74%, and they were really concerned. And so hopefully the additional option where if a project meets the 1 million spend in threshold for the post-production, they won't have those concerns about the 75%.
And can I just skip to Zachary Kahn to clarify in terms of percentages and to reiterate, hopefully that answers it. But so in 2013, the threshold was, as we mentioned, 20% or $3 million. And so now the threshold has been lowered to 10% or $500,000. So you spend that and you're in the program and you get a 30% credit. The incentive is 30%. So hopefully that's clear. That is what the new tax incentive language is going to be. That's now effective as of January 1st, 2025. and our plan for evangelizing the production companies. A lot of them are here on this call right now. Consider yourselves evangelized. That's our plan. We're gonna do some trips, and if you have any ideas, you know, people in post-production aren't necessarily the most expert marketers in the world because we like to sit in dark rooms, but we're open to all your ideas. And I know Vivian and Pete have a lot of ideas as it relates to evangelizing. Pete, do you want to take this question about, yes, this tax credit only pertains to scripted features and episodic, does not apply to documentaries, but the question is if there's a correlation with the influx of narrative post-production work and the impact of documentary post-world.
What's the question?
Can
Is
you
it
see
on
in
the
the
chat?
chat, Lucas?
I'm not
Go.
clear. What is it?
Lucas, do you want to unmute and ask it?
Yeah.
Hi, thanks for the floor. I was just asking, uh, thank you, for all your work. I was just wondering if is there a correlation for the fact that all these narrative work can come into New York? Does that mean does that,
Oh.
from the accounting side, have you ever seen like an influx of documentary work also coming into New York because of the influx of narrative work? I know it's not related.
No, it's a good question. You know, most every director that works in New York right now is also working on some, you know, if they're working on a scripted project, they're usually also working on an unscripted project, you know, like Spike Lee, Ben Stiller, you know, all of the writers and directors that work in scripted stuff usually have an unscripted project going. And, you know, so there is a correlation of, you know, an increase of work overall does, you know, tend to increase unscripted work, documentary work as well. You know, the challenges for the distribution market on both sides is slightly different, only because it's different buyers, it's different markets. And for a lot of the documentary filmmakers, I know they finish a lot of documentaries at Goldcrest. It's sort of the home for a lot of documentaries. And I know that they've just been challenged in a lot of those projects are self-financed or co-financed with other projects, you know, and then they're looking for their buyers. And I know that that's just been a difficult market for them in the last couple of years, you know, unrelated to any of the tax incentives that we may have changed. So, but by the same token, the busier that the scripted projects are, you know, the more of their other projects they do tend to get going. So, you know, I don't know if it's a one-to-one correlation or how to really measure it, but that is a trend that we've always seen. You know, there's always a passion project, you know, trailing along with projects when showrunners, writers, directors come into a facility or hire people, and oftentimes crews in post are working on the main scripted show, and then they're also, you know, on the weekend or whatever cutting, you know, something else.
Perfect. I didn't think you had statistics correlating it, but it's good to know that you're seeing it correlate, or
Yeah,
it's positive.
for
Hopefully.
sure.
Thank you.
And Lucas, just the fact that like people are here, are physically here. If there are jobs here, the people you want to work with are here, and the facilities that you need are here. And so I think it benefits everybody. I think it even benefits gaming and commercial world because it'll attract the talent that we need to do this work.
I wanted to mention too that in the post-production tax credit program, we do qualify hybrid projects in that if they're if the majority of the project is narrative scripted, 49% of it can be documentary footage. There have been shows in the past that have had reenactments or just narrative footage that was combined with interviews or other, non-narrative footage. So those projects are qualified, but it has to be very strictly timed so that the majority of the project is a narrative.
Thank you. Connie
Thank
and Yoni,
thank
have you
you.
had a chance to digest this Jed Dickerson question? Because I think this is a great opportunity to talk about a big change to the incentive program, which is that you can now submit your tax credit early to get it in the queue faster to get your credit faster.
Yeah, I think one thing to just clarify, this is something we're exploring doing through the program regulations, as it wasn't a statutory change. This would potentially allow independent companies to file their final application in the regular production program sooner, which producers have asked for, but folks would not be able to submit then a separate post-only application.
So in other words, you could file a final application after production is completed, but you'd have to forego post costs. And it's worth mentioning, and this is for the regular standard tax credit program, that we still have a lineup of projects to be reviewed and tax credits to be issued. And the your tax credit has to be used when you're filing for the allocation year that's on the tax credit certificate. And, we're currently running ahead in terms of calendar years. So it's just as Yoni said, the possibility is being explored, but there's still the provision that you have to file for the allocation year.
We anticipate in the coming weeks, maybe a month or two maximum, to release more formal regulations that'll have more information on where we are with that.
And also, we should mention that it is in legislation for the independent production program that a project can file when a project files for completion of the film or the television series, that they will be filing for the completion year rather than the allocation year. So that eliminates any potential waiting time.
So allocation year means the year that the pool of money we're pulling from. So when Connie says we're pulling ahead, or we're currently ahead, it means that, like, I think the current allocation year we're working on is 2027. I think that's the last certificate I saw.
Yep.
So that means that you can get your credit back when you file for your 2027 tax return in 2028. So that's some of the delay, but with the new regulations, the filing will be for completion year. So just tell me if I'm wrong, Connie, if my understanding of this is accurate, but if you complete your project in 2025, you can apply it to your 2025 tax return?
That's right. And that's for the independent film program, the new program.
Okay.
Is that similar to how it works for the post-only projects too?
Yeah, I mean, post projects file for the completion year. Yeah.
And I should have mentioned that our allocation in post only, it started at 7 million, then it went to 25 million, and now it's 45 million. So we've really improved. And you get it the year you complete the project.
Hi, this is Jed Dickerson. Can I just ask, because I was the one with that question, but what I was addressing is that because financing is such a crazy thing in the independent film business, we get loans against the tax credit, and until the loan is repaid with the credit, the rebate, it's at 20+%. So some films, I think, are going to Canada for post so that they can get the final application into New York just for production. That shortens the term of the loan by 4 or 5 months. And 20% of $1 million is 200,000. So it's a significant. It's been a holdup with getting loans against the New York tax credit. Hopefully, this new revised incentive, will help speed up the process of getting the rebate back. But we've had a bad reputation. I've been constantly telling people that it's vastly improved, but the companies that loan money against the tax credit are reluctant to do so. I think it's going to change, but one thing I see happening is that, in a way, if they can just do the production credit here in New York and move post to a place like Canada, where it costs less for a variety of reasons, that way they can get the loan paid back sooner, 4, 5, 6 months sooner, with the New York rebate. And I think it's something that is one of the reasons that we're losing post work in New York. And I think we're at a crisis point with post work in New York right now, facilities closing, people not being able to sustain their businesses, and employees, same thing, not getting the work. We've always lost post work to Canada. They have a good system there with their credits and the value of the American dollar there, and so I'd like I don't know if there's a way to avoid that. Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, I think, Jed, we hear what you're saying. Just to chime in briefly, and I think part of the changes that the governor led and others at ESD and the governor's office is hearing about the challenges for finance and for independent productions. And that was really the whole purpose between this new $100 million program with some more program caps to get people paid sooner. What you're describing in terms of people trying to shave 4 or 5 months off is not currently operational. So I don't think any existing practices from the past year or two would be attributable to people trying to file their final sooner in New York and take their post elsewhere. It's something that we hope is one of the solutions in the toolkit, that we would allow independent productions to file sooner. We hope that means that they would still do the post in New York and not do the post elsewhere. But we also hope that the new flexibility for VFX and animation and post-production will help attract more post to New York and offset any loss of post that might happen, because we're giving independent producers that flexibility. Because as you said, the cost of interest on a tax credit may be really significant compared to the additional credit options. I don't know if there's more to say on that.
Yeah. Just another positive aspect is the fact that an applicant no longer has to file their tax return over 3 years to get the full amount of the credit. If their credit is over $1 million, everybody is going to be able to file in the allocation year that's listed on the credit, and you'll get 100% of the tax credit back. So it's not the total solution, but it's headed in that direction.
Also, I don't know how, because to get the production credit, you have to prove that you've created a releasable element.
Correct.
So I'm not sure how they're getting their production credit back while they're doing post in Canada and repaying their loan. That's not how the credit works here in New York. You don't get your credit back, even if you only do production here and do post somewhere else. You don't get to submit your credit until you can prove that you've created a releasable element. So
Yeah, I mean, I think that's why.
We're
Mary,
still
you
looking
said
at it.
It was,
yeah.
Or sorry, what did you
yeah,
say?
no, you said explorational.
Yes, we're still figuring out how to make that happen, and I don't think we can attribute any actions over the past year or two to that.
But I
Yeah.
do think that I don't know that we've necessarily emphasized enough how the term I'm using is like steroidal. The Production Plus program is going to be because of its sunset and because of the fact that it says, I'll reiterate, when you spend $100 million in New York, every subsequent project you make here gets a 40% credit. I know those of you on this call who are budgeting things and you budget things based on where the credit is going to be maximized. You have to be taking a look at our town because at our state because of this. It's a pretty big deal. 40% is massive. So I think that I'm almost positive. I'm positive that we're going to be very busy for the coming years because of these temporary but intense stimulus that the state has done to the program.
And I wouldn't mind adding that, there was a contraction in the industry that no matter how good of a job we do, we couldn't do much about, post strikes. And even as tough as it has been in New York, and believe me, I know, it hasn't been as tough here as it's been in other territories. And I know it's hard to believe that because I know so many of us are suffering, right? As a result of the delays, but there has been an overall contraction of production, which can't be resolved through a tax credit.
Okay, let's get into Lucian's question. This is a good one. Going to you, Connie and Yoni. Do narrative features, TV episodic shows generated using AI qualify for the credit as VisFX animation? Is generative AI content considered animation?
Here's where I say that's really a good question. And I don't think we've even taken it under consideration yet. So that's something we'll do.
I mean, how would you know? If something is submitted as animation, VisFX, I mean, how would we know if it was made with generative AI as opposed to drawn or any other way that this is made?
Because they wouldn't have paid payroll tax in their application. Yana, you're the accountant.
Well,
No, I'm just kidding. I'm just kidding. I
if
know.
Lucian's company submits the invoice,
I
he's not
know.
going to be like, this was made
I
using
know.
generative AI. He's going to
I know.
here's your charge for visual effects animation. Pete.
I think AI is just like the next, there's 2D animation, 3D animation, now there's AI. It's just kind of like the next. So I assume it'll be considered a animation, but thought I'd ask. Thank you.
Unknown at this time, Lucian.
Thank you.
Okay, so I'll give my thoughts on the Netflix studios in New Jersey. It's going to take, what, 6 years on some army base out there. It's got a lot of problems. And where are they going to do post? I mean, it takes so when our entire credit started in 2004, New York had one of the only 2 legitimate post infrastructures in the country. Basically, it was New York and Los Angeles. It's developed more around the country, but not much. I mean, I don't feel like I'm exaggerating when I say it takes 20 years to create a post infrastructure. So I personally don't feel threatened by what is happening in New Jersey, but I will throw it to the rest of the panel because of course we've all thought about this and we've discussed it at length as a board. I just am not worried. So
we've talked about this a lot. And, having, I've built companies and divisions of companies, all over the globe, really, in the last 25 years, and, I always use Louisiana as a great example. When they passed their initial production tax credit, it was, an exciting thing for Louisiana, right? And it was a boon of work. And so they were like the first domestic one that people were super excited about, because before it was really just, Toronto, Vancouver, and some Eastern European countries. And so people rushed down there, and we put in a decent amount of infrastructure. Labs were built. There were the Twilight films, True Detectives, a bunch of HBO series. There was a lot of stuff. And because they had moved so quickly with their tax credit, because the legislation wasn't really something that they had worked hard on, and it was a tradable tax credit, the money really wasn't coming from the state of Louisiana. At some point, with an administration change, there was a massive hiccup. And all of a sudden, all this infrastructure that we had built, we lost the production tax credit down there for 18 months. And now everybody who had invested $1 as a business owner, all of a sudden the productions were like, well, we have to do what's right for us. I'm glad we convinced you to build all this stuff for us. We're going to Georgia because they just passed a tax credit, and they left the state. And so, as business owners, we lost a lot of money. And, that was a lesson learned. And so when you look at the New York State tax credit, these are conversations that started as early as 2004. They've been through multiple governor administrations. There isn't a legislator in New York State and any elected official that doesn't know about this as a topic, that hasn't weighed in on it. They know the benefits for their community beyond just some kind of political football to punt around. They have constituents that are hired. They have labor unions that can show the numbers, and it's a mature credit. And in New Jersey, we have to give them a lot of credit. They've attracted a lot of work. They've made a big deal with Netflix, and they're moving very quickly. But as a business owner, when you're raising capital, you're spending capital, you're thinking about going out and building out post facilities in New Jersey to try to match that, you have to take into account it's a very immature and young tax credit. They're headed for an administration change that's coming now. And when you talk to the different politicians in New Jersey, not everyone even knows that it's great. Not everyone is even for it. There's many districts that don't benefit from it at all. So there's always the other foot, to land on, or the other shoe to uncover. What happens again? Something else happens, and then
Few drops.
Right. And so, that's just something for us to think about. So as a business community, when we think about New Jersey, we have to weigh all of that into account. And, so will we all run and build out there in New Jersey? We won't. Will we support projects that shoot in New Jersey and come to New York for the New York Post only tax credit? Of course we will. And so it remains to be seen. So I think you have to deal with neighboring states, different counties, international tax credits with a little bit of trepidation, because they're nothing like the extent of which we feel our tax credit in New York State is embedded in the very fabric of our economic system.
But the governor certainly has, took it seriously enough to make these changes, which puts us in an
Correct.
incredibly aggressive position. I think this is a great question to end on, Connie and Yoni. There's the floor for New York City versus New York State, like minimum budget to qualify for the tax credit? I believe it's $1 million in New York.
It's $1 million in the 5 boroughs, and Nassau and Suffolk and Westchester and Rockland, and the other counties that are all the other counties north of that. It's $250,000 for basic eligibility to be in the program, and it's $500,000 minimum to be eligible for the 10% added credits on labor, no matter how much, you're shooting upstate, and labor and production if you're doing the majority of production in upstate New York. So that's a 50% credit, if you're shooting a majority of your project in upstate New York.
Move to Buffalo. I hope that answered your question, Joanna, and good luck with your project and your screenplay. Thank you so much, everyone.
Please stay in touch. We'll do more of these in the future. Bye-bye.